This is Rachel Hill with the African American Cultural Garden Sankofa web series. And in this series, we're going to highlight some of the most amazing things about Cleveland. We're going to talk to wonderful people, and you are going to learn about the history of the African American Cultural Gardens. Right now in history, this is so important to us because it looks at the past, the present, as well as the middle passage. So these are key things that people don't know about, don't study, but we're going to talk about it some more. We're going to talk about what does Black history and culture mean to our guests, mean to us, and also what does Black history mean as well as our lives continue to evolve and take place in this society as of now, from our ancestors to present day. One of the reasons why I am a part of this garden is because I believe in it, and I believe in learning about our culture, learning about our history, and also what lies in store for future generations. I actually know the president and the development chair, and once they told me about the garden, which I'd never heard of before, I was so excited to try my hand to see what I can do to help bring this to prominence. We need donations. We need to be able to grow our garden, but we're very excited to present this series to you. My co-host Kenny Hill, you're going to see some interviews with some movers and shakers in the city of Cleveland, very important people, and learn about them, and you're going to learn about the garden as well. We hope you stay tuned. Enjoy the show.
Hello, my name is Courtney A. Barton, and I'm the Program Director for Arts and Culture and Racial Equity Initiatives at the Cleveland Foundation. The Cleveland Foundation is proud to sponsor the Association of African American Cultural Gardens Black History and Culture webcast series. Culture is the way that we interact and make sense of the world and express ourselves. It is also an inherent human need and a basic human right enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Too often, the story of Black culture is framed as one of deprivation, but I would like to talk about the ways in which Black culture has always thrived. Take, for instance, Adinkra symbols. Now, the symbol of the African American Culture Garden is an Adinkra symbol, Sankofa bird, which is a bird that is depicted as flying forward while looking backwards. Adinkra symbols are an ancient West African writing system originating in a part of the continent that is also known for its ironworkers. Now, when these ironworkers were kidnapped from their ancestral lands and brought to this continent to help build this country, they often embedded Adinkra symbols in the iron that they wrought. So if you ever have the opportunity to visit an antebellum or colonial building, take a close look at the wrought iron you may find in gates and fences. Rather than a series of decorative shapes, it's often Adinkra symbols you will be looking at. And though you may not understand the meaning of each individual symbol, the overall message to take is that our ancestors survived and retained their and our culture and managed to create great beauty in the midst of the most adverse circumstances.
Hello viewers, this is the African American Cultural Gardens webcast series. I'm KD Hale. Our webcast series was designed to educate, to inform, to inspire and empower through interesting interviews, facts, showcasing talents and abilities as well. So we're so pleased today to have on our program Ms. Chrishawndra Matthews of Literacy in the Hood. Welcome to our program.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thank you for joining us too. So before we tell the audience a little bit more about Literacy in the Hood, we want to hear about you, your story. Would you mind sharing with our viewers about your life?
Well, at a later age in life, I had a son. And after having my son later on in life, he started reading at an early age. He started reading at 3. And because I lived in the inner city, because this was the rent that I could afford, there was no place in the inner city that can help me strengthen him as a reader. As I began to look for the free resources, I found story time over at the Fleet Library, and I went, but what I noticed is the librarian dealt with behavior for about 10 or 15 minutes of the 30 to 45 minute story time. So I would find myself in the Heights Library, Sugar Library, all the different libraries, seeking out ways to make my son a stronger learner and to help him on the path to becoming a lifelong learner. After that, I knew that I was the type of parent that would drive, and I didn't mind going. But I started thinking, what about the other parents that don't drive or can't drive or don't have access to the suburban resources that were available for a reader? And I began to volunteer for some of the bigger names here in Cleveland, but I didn't really understand that nonprofit was such a competitive world. And I volunteered for some of the smaller names that were attached to literacy. And then I said, I'm a kind of out the box person. I didn't want to be in nobody's box. So that's when I created Literacy in the Hood. Hood stands for helping out our disenfranchised. And in the city of Cleveland, 66% of adults are functioning illiterate, and 2 out of 3 of our CMSD students don't have any books at home, period. So just by putting those 2 statistics together and then running on COVID-19, it's just so much going on in the world. And that's what's been keeping the fire up underneath my feet.
Sure, wonderful. Now, how would you define literacy? For those who have heard the term, how would you define literacy? What does that encompass?
Literacy is your ability to take some information, to read it, to understand it, and to be able to comprehend it. When we were young, you know, they called it reading, writing, and math, reading, writing, arithmetic.
Yes.
But so much has changed. The biggest thing that I would really say, parents have to get vested back in their children's education. And COVID-19 is going to be the opportunity when you're going to have no other choice. The days of just getting them dressed real cute and sending them to school and the teacher going to handle that, it's kind of over. And what I mean is that you need to understand when it's time for them to take the 3rd grade reading test and the scores and what are those scores, you know, based off. Children missed a quarter of school, and now we got the summer. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the summer slide, but I'm not referring to the one that's at the park. The summer slide says if you don't read 6 books over the summer, at least, when school starts back, you're not reading at the same grade level. Then we have the word gap. The word gap says that children in the suburbs go to school knowing 1,800,000 more words than children in the inner city and urban communities.
Wow.
However, if you pull out a calculator and you do 20 minutes a day times 365, you're gonna come out with this number that is gonna show you it's not really a word gap. Children in the suburbs are reading. Children in the inner city, they're not reading. So what can we do to make a difference? One of the things I tell parents, especially with parents with black, brown, red, and green sons, all of them got some type of game, gaming system, iPhone, tablet. You know, I got some family members got an iPhone before me.
Yes.
You know, iPhone, but I'm saying before they push the power button, this is a rule in my house, before he pushed the power button, he ought to read a book. It's just ain't no other choice. It's flat out. When we're riding in the car, he's probably gonna wanna see my phone because that game system is at the house. Before he see my phone in the car, guess what he gotta do? He gotta read a book. So I got books in the car, we got books at home, and then I just teach parents because I hear parents so many times tell me, oh, I can't get my son to read. And I'm like, let's take back over parenting. Because when you take back over the parenting, you the parent, you know, I remember my grandmother used to say, if I have to leave my job and day and come up to that school, I didn't really understand, but I never made her leave her job and have to come up to my school because I didn't want to know what the repercussions were. So some of those fears that she installed with me made me go to school, act like I had some sense, so that she don't have to leave her job and day and come up to that. Like, it's still fresh. Like, I can hear her. She's no longer with us, but I can still hear her. But what she was saying was, go to that school and act like you got some sense. Don't go to that school and embarrass me. Don't go to that school and make that school make me have to leave my job to come up to that school. And when we take parenting back seriously, we'll be the advocates for our children again. We'll be doing the pop-ups again where we just pop up at the school and see what's going on. It won't be just when the school calls you and tells you something bad about your child. We'll build the parent, teacher, school relationships again.
Partnership.
And those are the things that are missing in the inner city. Right.
So before we dive more into the literacy piece and your work in the community, let's hear more about you. Where'd you go to school? Where are you from? Are you from Cleveland?
Yes, I originally grew up in East Cleveland all the way to 10th grade. In 10th grade, my mother decided we was moving across town.
Okay.
So we moved across town off Barlett 153rd, which made me graduate from John F. Kennedy.
Okay.
So I'm a John F. Kennedy Eagle. However, like I go to everything Shaw, everything East Cleveland.
Yes.
Because I felt like I was with them from kindergarten to 10th grade.
Yes.
So I feel like that was my family, but then I had like this new
You have an
little
extended family
I have an
across
extended
town.
family across town now. Growing up in East Cleveland in the 70s and in the 80s were different. At that time, East Cleveland was an affluent city with many resources at that time. At that time, you wanted your child to attend East Cleveland schools because in the 70s and in the 80s, they were one of the good schools with great numbers in the district. We all know since then, in the 2020s, East Cleveland has changed dramatically. But growing up in East Cleveland, my grandmother moved to East Cleveland from down south, bringing her family to the north. She worked for a company here that she retired from, and she raised her family in East Cleveland, and the house is still in East Cleveland, the family house, to this day. My father's parents also, first house was in East Cleveland.
Okay.
So what it allowed me to do was catch the number 6 up and down Euclid at like 10 years old.
Yep.
Get on by Wendy's, get off by Red Barn. So they, trusted me enough growing up. The school system was impeccable. I remember in 10th grade leaving Shaw and going to CMSD schools and feeling like, oh, party over here. Like,
Okay. You saw a difference there.
No, I saw free. It was wide open free. I'll give you an example. At Shaw, you had in high school you're supposed to take swimming. Like I said, I graduated in '90, so this is the '80s. You had to take swimming. You had to get dressed for swimming, even if you did not swim. That was just a part of getting your grade. Okay. When I transferred to CMSD, it was a pool. But we had a party every day.
Okay.
It was like a pool party. Like, where's the instructor? Like, we're not gonna get dressed.
Right.
How are we gonna get graded for this class?
Okay.
The structure was lack. I know for me, being an outsider and being transferred in, it was easy for me to stay to my curriculum because I was new. So I didn't have no clique or nobody to fall off with, or for like with everybody when you grow up with them from kindergarten.
Yes.
You may break off into different elementary schools, but you all meet back up at Kirk, and then you all meet back up again at Shaw. So in CMSD, it just was so different, and I didn't understand why we were bused to school, and it was a school that we passed. It just was just different. However, what it made me do was hone in and focus on that same education like I was getting before I left Shaw.
Yes.
Meaning, stay up on your grades, stay up on your homework, and stay up on your schoolwork.
Education is so powerful, and you're
my,
doing that work right now with literacy.
Thank you.
Let's
so
talk about
much.
African American history. What are your perspectives on African American history?
Well, my biggest perspective on African American history is we were killed when we wanted to learn how to read.
Yeah.
And now I gotta kill them to get them to read. You know what I mean?
Wow.
When I really think about history, listening to the stories of the elders, some can read and what grade level that they could read on because they had to drop out of school to go and take care of their families.
Yes.
Understanding that the original GED is because they dropped out of school to take care of their families. Some went to the mines, some went to various jobs at younger ages. So the original GED was supposed to be an equivalent high school because you didn't finish the per se high school, but that
Diploma.
has changed too.
Yeah.
And then when I think about it, I think about the plight on our ancestors' shoulders to get us to where we were today. Some of us are first generation college students. I was a first generation college student. So a lot of that falls on the weight and the plight of the ancestors and the generation before me to prepare us to be in a place that we were able to go to college, both my brother and I. And then listening to the elders, because all of them can't read past the 9th grade level. Not all of them, a lot of them. And a lot of them taught themselves further reading once they migrated to
No
the
question.
north in various
It was a
ways.
different day back then, but they had the vision and the aspirations for a better future for their their family members in the future. So we really stand on their shoulders and we really salute them and honor them, our elders and our ancestors, by doing our best today, diving into education. You mentioned that many people, it's a struggle to get some people to read. It reminds me of a movie I saw years ago. It's called Nightjohn. Not sure if you ever have heard of the movie, but I encourage all our viewers to check out this movie called Nightjohn. You can find it on Netflix or just do a Google search. But it talks about the power of reading and the fact that back in the day, in the 1800s, we were prevented from reading. People of color were prevented from reading. So it's just interesting. So we have to change that. So I'm really glad that you're involved with literacy, because that's the foundation. And many people may be surprised to understand that even doing math better depends on literacy and the comprehension.
I want to also share something with you when you go home. There's a video on YouTube called The Teacher That Couldn't Read.
Okay.
And what it taught about was coping mechanisms.
Okay.
And what it talked about is, although he couldn't read, he was a teacher. His wife did the homework, checked the children's homework. And he said once a month they had a meeting, and he just really shared how he, for like maybe 17 years, I don't know how many years he taught, but he himself couldn't read. And what I got out of it, and why it's always fresh with me, is that a lot of times every day we're around people that are coping, but don't necessarily have the literacy skills that they need to function on a daily basis. In Cleveland alone, we could just stay right here, 66% of Clevelanders function illiterate. When they took this study, they based it off the RTA schedule, being able to read it, filling out a job application, and a rental application. So when you take 66%, all right, out of the pie, that's a big piece of the pie.
Yes.
A lot of the work I do a lot of work in Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant brings home the most, I don't know the big term, but the most people that come home from prison go to Mount Pleasant for whatever reason. So a lot of what I do in Mount Pleasant is try and help flood the books, flood the knowledge, and flood them with the resources, because hopefully we can work on that 66%. And the easiest way that we can work on that 66% is something so simple. If you were my dad and I was your daughter, I could read to you on my level, and then you read back to me on your level.
Yes.
And if every day we just read to one another, it's going to increase my vocabulary.
Right.
It's going to increase the amount of words you know. It's going to make us stronger readers as a unit together, and then we'll be working on that 66% together.
That's powerful. Each one teach one. So thank you for being involved in that work, that important work, and that you're called to do. We can tell you're passionate about. So thank you so much.
Literacy in the Hood is the only avenue right now in the city of Cleveland where a parent, a child, or a caregiver can have access to free books. So once again, if you need free books, if you need free snacks, this is what we do. Make sure we're feeding their bodies and we're feeding their brains.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just heard from Miss Chrishawndra Matthews of Literacy in the Hood, a passionate hero and shero who's getting the work done for our community. We want you to really support the African American Cultural Gardens. This program is brought to you by the African American Cultural Gardens. We need your support. Just check it out. Check us out on www.AAACG.org. You can find the website. You can know how you can get involved. We thank you for tuning in, and we'll be back on the other side.
Hi, my name is Levita Ewing from the Association of African American Cultural Garden, and I'm here to ask you to join the movement to help us to complete your garden, the African American Garden, which is one of 36 gardens in the Cleveland Federation of Cultural Gardens here in Cleveland, Ohio. Our garden represents the past, the present, and the future. The past pavilion has already been built. It represents our ancestors going through a doorway and a corridor of no return. Water will cascade down underneath a 50-foot granite place where our ancestors have emerged here in this country to the top of every level in music, science, education, medicine, with a vision for the future, which is our future generation. What a wonderful way to support this part of our history by donating to the African American Cultural Garden. All donations are tax deductible. Go to AAACG.org for your contribution. Thank you.
This is Rachel Hill with the African American Cultural Gardens Sankofa web series. And we are here today with Councilwoman Yvonne Caldwell, and she's our special guest today. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Rachel.
Amazing. Glad to have you here today.
Thank
so
you.
can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us your
Where do you-
background. You were born in Cleveland.
I was born in Cleveland. Actually, I was born in Shaker. My mom and dad were married for 2 years, if you want to call it.
Okay.
So they split. So my mom left, back then Pennington was in Shaker.
That's the street I lived on.
Get out.
Yes, 3686 Pennington.
3608, so probably neighbors
Yeah.
back
Oh my.
then. So mom split, came back to her roots here, right here on 105 is where I grew up, Green Lawn Avenue, which is down the street. She moved back in to take care of my grandfather and remarried and all that, of course. So if you want to say that I was born, but I was born in Mount Sinai, so you could say
Me too.
which many people don't know since it's tore down, Mount Sinai Hospital. So
Are we like sisters?
maybe.
I don't
So Cleveland, for real. I was born. I just was taken to Shaker for a brief moment, and grew up on off of 105.
What high school?
We just got finished talking about that. I was caught up in the busing era, so I started out in Glenville for my first year. Back then it was, and I'm still 21 guys, it was 3 years of high school, 10th, 11th, and 12th back then. So I went to Glenville like all the rest of my family had graduated from, and busing happened. So I got bused to, it was the Glenville Lincoln West cluster, and I got bused to Lincoln West. Had a few issues I didn't like, and so I transferred to West Tech. So I literally in the middle of the school year. So I finished at West Tech. I did 2 years at West Tech. So I'm a warrior, but my heart is a tar-blooder forever. I married a tar-blooder. I'm still mad at my mom today, which now lives with me. Like, why didn't you let me, I got to get over it. But Glenville High School.
And then after high school, what did you do?
High school, I then went to Bowling Green. Back then, I didn't know a lot about work study and a lot of things. That's why I kind of like a social worker at heart. I believe if people know about the resources and where to get them, then your life can take a whole new trajectory. Well, I literally couldn't go back to my second year of at Bowling Green because I didn't have $563. Literally $563. I remember that number, and I had worked all summer. It wasn't like I worked at a mental health facility out in Fairfield, Ohio, and I stayed up with my roommates that summer, and I worked trying to go back with them, and it just didn't happen. So my husband, which was my friend all my life, wasn't my husband then, came up and helped me move my stuff back up, and so he helped me get in touch with Tri-C because Bowling Green at that time was on semesters, and Tri-C and Cleveland State were on quarters. So I went to Tri-C during the off time, and then I applied for Cleveland State and finished there.
Okay. And what is your degree in?
Liberal studies.
Okay.
I took a lot of religion and women classes. I initially started out as physical therapy. So that's why I picked Bowling Green. At that time, I think it was only Ohio State, Kent State, or Bowling Green that offered the physical therapy, or Cleveland State as well. But I didn't want to, no kid wants to stay home. I didn't want to go to Kent because my friend Kevin was there and he would have told my mother everything, right? So that's kind of how I picked Bowling Green. And I couldn't afford Ohio State, so.
Okay. And then what did you do after college?
I think I got married somewhere in there.
Okay.
Got married, was still trying to obtain my degree. Kevin was as well. Started having children, family started happening. And so I struggled working full time, being a mom, being a wife, and trying to get my degree. When we first had our first child, we understood that even though everything in the economy was kind of good, that we wanted to succeed, and we both had goals that we wanted to finish our degree. So I stayed home with our son, Kevin Jr., and Kevin only had like a semester to finish at Kent. So he literally went and stayed back on campus, off campus, but down there, commute was terrible, and finished. And so
Still terrible.
at his graduation ceremony, we had our little 1-year-old there, and then he came back and just continued. I kept trying to compete and finish with my degree. He had his, and sometimes women have to do a little different things.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So as far as career-wise, what do you do currently?
Currently, I'm a county councilwoman. According to the charter, Cuyahoga County Charter, it's part-time. But prior to that, pretty much a social worker all my life. I've worked almost for every agency that has to do with the umbrella under the county. Now, Jewish Family Services, Coania Homes, just to name a few. And then I took a break from that. Anything I'd like to really project is people change, people grow older. And even though you might start in a profession that you love at that time, I just want to let the kids and the listeners to know that we change, we grow, we want to change, we want to expand, or we get burnt out from what we're doing. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. I got burnt out. So I needed a change, I needed a break. Case files, I was spending so much time staying at the office late trying to keep the paperwork up. And making sure that we could bill properly. And then it became a creative writing type of thing. Well, I didn't sign up for creative writing. What you could bill for. Sometimes people downstate that are in offices decide but they don't talk to the people that are actually doing the job to see if this is feasible, if it works. So, my husband's like, you're at the office more than you're here. Kids were old enough to pretty much fend for themselves without mom being there, but I was missing out on a lot. So I got a job down at the county. So that's how I opened up the world of being in the county government. And that was pre the new form of government, so it was still under the 3-commissioner system.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say that some of the biggest changes, some of the biggest things that are affecting the population of Cleveland, social work-wise, that people don't really think about or assess when it comes to poverty, crime, things like that? What are people missing that they don't take an opportunity to learn about?
Well, you really have to know where the resources are and how to get the resources. That's basically what a toolkit that the social worker needs. They have to know where those resources are, even if they're not publicly broadcasted. We have a lot of federal dollars, state dollars. They're in danger of going back if people don't utilize them. But as a social worker, you're stuck with seeing your clients, doing your home visits, getting back to the office, writing up your paperwork, doing your billing. Do you really have time to get out into that community to let them know, other than that person that you're visiting, what is out there for you to take advantage of? There's a lot of people in need, and there's a lot of resources out there. How do we connect them? So that, really helped me along with wanting to be a community organizer, getting information. How do we get information to the people? If the people aren't coming to the elected officials meetings, if they're not coming to the community meetings, if they're not coming out, how do we get that information? So you have to take that information to the door. Maybe everybody doesn't need SNAP benefits, using that as an example, but they're about 50% or 30% is going to need those SNAP benefits, and they don't know how to access it. And if you watch the elected officials today, it's all about, let's get it in the libraries, let's get it in, other venues, Cleveland Food Bank. Let's have other opportunities for people to sign up, because they know it's a lack of people knowing where those resources are.
And why would you say people are disengaged?
I think people are upset not just with their elected officials, but I had to really kind of break that down and figure that out. So when I take myself, for example, and I was just having dinner with a mentee last night at Zanzibar, give them a little shout out. And she had never been, even though she lived around the corner. Well, she now lives in Washington, so she's up from Washington. She works for Tim Ryan, an elected official, and so, you know, she was talking about policy and things of that nature. But I think people are disengaged because things have changed, you know. So a lot of people think that once they elect you, they put it all on your shoulders, not knowing that they need to participate along with you to make you stronger, so you can be a stronger voice for the community that you represent, which includes them. So I say, for example, that I love people, but going back to the county story, we'll just skip that, and going back to this county story where I had realized when I worked 9 to 5 or 8 to 4, I'm so regimented. Most people are so regimented, they have to have, you know, I got to get home. I would literally go to the county, drop my kids off, go to the county, come home, park, pull a few weeds, literally, you know, because I don't really have time. Everything goes on the weekend. Go in the house, cook dinner. You're exhausted. You're getting your kids prepared for the next day. You're getting yourself prepared for the next day. So I don't fault the community, because if you're on that kind of schedule, when do you have time to go out to a Councilman Conwell's meeting or something like that? So then that's where you get the retired people, the seniors, because they have that time. They're not in that regimented daily, but you know, the ones that need the resources and the information also includes those families. So how do you reach them? So that goes back to my point. We had to really think, how do you reach those individuals to know, let them know when meetings are, what's important and what's happening in economic development, how it's impacting them. You've got to create a flyer and put it literally on their door.
What does Black history and culture mean to you?
I love it. I think our younger generations today need to be more engaged with teaching their children about it. For example, my youngest daughter, she said, I forget, it was Martin Luther King Day, not this year, but last year. And some kid at the school really didn't know what Martin Luther King Day was. And he thought that she was back in that era. So that shows you, she's like, "Mom, the first time I ever felt old," and she's in her 20s. Because that kid didn't know, that means that they're not getting it at school and they're not getting it at home to really put a framework of when MLK was. I have a motto: if you don't know where you came from, how in the heck do you know where you're going? So any history, African American history especially, is important to the African American people. We're the only, if you think about it, and I was thinking about this the other day, thinking about what I was going to say, we're the only people that have actually changed what we were called through the course of history. No one else. Jewish has remained Jewish, Italians have remained Italian. When the divide happened and we were brought over here, we went for kings and queens to Negro, colored, African American, Black. We're the only culture that is, we need to just find out, let's go to stick with kings and queens, because that's what we were.
And what does a garden mean to you?
The African American garden is awesome. There's some history behind that. I don't know if I fully know it all, but this has been a project that they have tried to get over a number of years. I know over 20 years, and you'll probably hear more from that from the president himself, of trying to have somewhere solid of where people can not worship, but go and see about African American history, and just to be knowledgeable that that exists, not just for us and our people, but other cultures. The gardens before the African American garden and the Indian garden were made up of 29 European countries. So we know that's not what makes the world. So it's very important to have a presence and for us to still contribute to that. Actually, a little side note with Carl, they have Carl Ewing, the president of the African American Cultural Gardens, has this definitely needs to be on there so other people can start doing it. The pop tabs or the can tabs, they have a fundraiser going where you save them and they can get so much money per ton, and it all goes toward the implementation of the garden. So I have everyone in the neighborhood around here doing it, and I gotta tell Carl, I just saw him. I got some more on my back porch he can get. So save your tabs, you know, your beer tabs, your pop can tabs, not the can. It's really unique because the can gives you less money than the actual tab.
Oh, wow.
Wow, right.
Yeah.
So
Well, I just want
I'm
to
doing that.
thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for
thank
telling
you.
us your story and all the other information that you gave us and the resources as well.
Okay.
This is Rachel Hill for the African American Cultural Series, Sankofa Series. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed this episode and you learned a little bit more about our garden and people in our community. Please sow a seed and watch us grow. You can go to our website to donate, and also our social media links will appear below so you can get caught up on all the updates at the garden and see what we're doing. Please stay tuned for further episodes that you will enjoy in the future. Sow a seed and watch us grow.